So last week, Prime Minister Trudeau announced $176 million in new funding for several initiatives across the continent. So last week was a really big week for Canada-Africa relations. The head of the AU came to visit, but he didn't come alone. He brought a huge delegation, which included the head, the Trade Commissioner for the AU, Mr. Muchanga, and the Development Commissioner for the AU, Madam Samantha, and their teams. And there was a whole day of back-to-back meetings and check marks on things that we had discussed. In the first high-level dialogue between Canada and the AU in 2022 in Ethiopia, and the second one was in Toronto last week. So, so Prime Minister Trudeau showed up on Thursday and announced a number of deliverables that came from that dialogue, the things that the AU had asked us for, and that included increasing the number of embassies and missions that Canada has on the African continent. So Prime Minister Trudeau announced 2 additional embassies to be established in Africa, in addition to Rwanda, Benin and Zambia. Rwanda was announced before the high-level dialogue at the last Commonwealth Summit in Kigali. The Prime Minister also announced a special focal person, an envoy, a Canadian envoy to Africa. So a person who will coordinate African engagement and policy across the government on trade, development, humanitarian affairs, peace and security, everything, diplomacy. He also announced the appointment of a Canadian special envoy to the Sahel region, because that region is undergoing a lot of challenges, as you know, from Mali all the way to Chad. So again, that person will be responsible for humanitarian issues, diplomatic presence, navigating that whole area. And you'll be proud of Canada because France is withdrawing from that region. They're closing embassies. Everyone is closing, but we have said we're not going anywhere. And our embassies will remain open, and ministers will re-announce that again. We are doubling down on our engagement with Africa because 10 of the world's fastest growing economies are there. The fastest growing middle class in the whole world. The most youthful population in the whole world. And soon they'll become the largest workforce, something Mr. Boissonnault can talk about a lot. We will have 1 billion young people joining the workforce in the global south. Many of them will be from Africa. So how we harness that power and that large and growing middle class is something that I think if we position Canada properly, we could benefit immensely and also benefit Africa. So at the high-level dialogue, I said, Mr. Boissonnault, the Prime Minister announced something called a Diaspora engagement mechanism. So 1.2 million people from the continent live in Canada. They don't have a formal mechanism to influence our policy in Africa. Now they'll have one. We also launched a new and renewed and reinvigorated Africa Trade and Development Program. This is really important because this is the link between development and trade. Because when people have a bigger capacity to improve their health outcomes, their education outcomes, and their purchasing power, they can trade. They can move from development to trade. And that nexus between development and trade doesn't get appreciated as much. So this will enable us to have trade and development go hand in hand. I'll give you an example. Instead of having people chopping wood, trees to burn, creating firewood or coal, it's providing a mixture of grants and loans to enable a particular community to build a power plant. And that saves the environment, it saves women from what is essentially a very dangerous task of always going to collect firewood. And it liberates people to do more, light manufacturing and other economic activities when you have access to power. That's a huge thing that the African Union told us to invest in. So this will enable us to transition people from development to trade through this trade and development program. And then it's also about investing in young people. So we have a huge focus, and we've heard from the AU that Canada should do more to invest in technical and vocational training for young people, particularly green jobs. We heard about the local angle of that even this morning. So last week, Prime Minister Trudeau announced $176 million in new funding for several initiatives across the continent. So everything from empowering women to be able to fight gender-based violence, to be able to change legislation so that they can own land. In some societies, they can't even own land. To open bank accounts, to have access to capital. As I talked about youth, I talked about and supporting climate change adaptation. A lot of the funding for climate action is climate mitigation and transition to renewable energy. A lot of that is loans. Now, in many African communities, that doesn't work. They want adaptation and they want grants. This will help with that and fight poverty. Today, I'm joining you in announcing new money together with Minister Boissonnault. We're proud to announce an additional, and this is new money, it hasn't been announced last week, this is from my ministry, $35.2 million specifically targeting women and girls in Africa. So I have a list of projects that I can go through where this money is going to. One, $12.4 million is going to World Vision Canada. This will help 56,000 people, mainly women, to deal with environmental shocks. So it'll enable them to support people to respond to environmental stresses, lack of water, droughts, extreme weather events. So enabling them to grow more drought-resistant crops, enabling them to have access to clean water and so on. 10 million is going to UN Women, which is about funding really a huge reinvigorated campaign to end violence against women. Providing support to civil society organizations on the ground. So the money is going to local organizations through the UN, including women rights organizations across many countries, implementing laws and policies to address and eliminate violence against women. $6 million to increase funding for women's voice and leadership. This is a really, really important program. So what this program does is we don't tell those women's organizations across the continent what to do. They identify their priorities, we just fund them. So it's a very localized program. So some of them will say our priority is to do climate action. Others will say we need to change laws around land ownership. Others will change laws around running for office, making it easier for folks to run for office. I met with a number of female candidates in the Democratic Republic of Congo who this program enabled them to run for office. And they're already thinking about the next campaign. So women's voice and leadership, we support women's organizations, thousands of women's organizations across the world. 53% of this money goes to Africa, sub-Saharan Africa. So it's really, it's going to help about 117,000 people. And this is a very, like, it doesn't get more local than this. And we even understood the importance of understanding that those small, effective organizations on the ground, women-led, women-focused, don't have the capacity to navigate Global Affairs Canada application procedures. So this, we made it very flexible, this particular Women's Voice and Leadership Fund, to be easy to apply to and flexible in terms of even the implementation. So for example, you're doing democracy training here with this community, and suddenly in the next district there's fighting going on and people are displaced. Suddenly you have people who need tents. This program gives you the nimbleness and the permission to adjust and provide tents. Normally you can't do that with Global Affairs Canada funding because the agreement is like very tight, right? And then last but not least, supporting the rights of women and girls in Somalia. There's a lot of issues around early marriage, female gender mutilation, and so on. And then, sorry, I forgot one more, $1.8 million for making sure that people in Malawi advance, get training in financial management, business development, human rights, access to small pools of capital, access to de-risking the financial institutions there to look at this new pool of people as an opportunity, not as a risk. So we're mitigating risks and promoting the opportunities. So that's what I'm announcing today. It was a very good discussion by the community members, and they really demonstrated in their comments and their experiences the connection between development and trade. You could see that when we invest in people, when we empower women and girls, when we empower young people, when we support indigenous communities outside of Canada, it results in more peaceful, prosperous communities that can then engage in win-win trade and investment with us. So you saw in the room a real desire to expand our engagement with Africa. People are very excited about our New Africa strategy and the pieces of that strategy that are coming out, including establishing more embassies in Africa, appointing a special envoy for Africa and a special envoy for the Sahel, investing more in trade and investment in Africa as well as development. So, there's a lot of input that I also took from community members on how we can do better in terms of the engagement. Thank you.
I think this was very impactful to the community. The fact that this was done at the Africa Center and people came in and spoke about community leaders being part of it and spoken about what the importance, hearing the announcement and also spoken about what was important to them was really something that was really powerful. So we were really blessed. I feel really blessed that we sat here, with community leaders and hearing from them what is important. So it truly has an impact. It truly is capturing voices as well. I think it was important to hear from community leaders what is important and how they want to move forward with this. I think this was powerful. This is what I could say.
Thank you, Dr. Edna. And I echo Dr. Edna's comments that the conversation around partnership and trade between sub-Saharan Africa and Canada is really important. It's important for us as Edmontonian and Western Canada's Black communities because we're one of the largest growing Black population groups in Canada. And this matters because the connection and the importance of the diaspora communities has been highlighted in the strategy that Minister Ahmed Hussen, Minister of International Development, has just outlined. And this matters because we need to strengthen the diaspora to be able to provide the supports. And this is on the social front. And the other piece is the economic front. The Africa Center, along with a couple of other organizations that are here in Alberta, have led the Black Entrepreneurial Program. And this is a program where we see an easy connection and an easy touch point with people that want to do business, whether they are in the diaspora or they are back home in Africa. So the success of programs and the continuation of programs like the Black Entrepreneurial Program with the ability to be able to leverage the trade that we want to have with sub-Saharan Africa is an easy opportunity, and we look forward to those opportunities of those things coming together in a synergistic way. I thank you.
Advancement is also going to create lots of business opportunities, business development in Africa, and it's going to create more jobs and then strengthen the relationship, the bilateral relationship between Africa and Canada.
Okay. Thank you, Mrs. Christiana. Mr. Dickey, from this announcement, what do you think important for your business and the organization?
Je pense que une rencontre comme celle-là, c'est une rencontre vraiment très importante pour nous, en tant que leader de la communauté, pouvoir rencontrer les décideurs. Et nous sommes vraiment très heureux, par exemple, cette annonce des fonds qui sont disponibles, qu'on pourrait donner auprès de communautés. Et puis, ce qui est très important, c'est que le ministre voulait entendre aussi ce que nous, qui travaillons, nous sommes, comme on le dit en anglais, le frontline. Nous qui travaillons avec ces populations, nous qui avons un background avec nos pays d'origine, comment que ces dollars canadiens pourront avoir un impact sur nos communautés et comment que cet argent, comment qu'on pourrait aussi aider aussi les leaders qui sont en Afrique qui puissent comprendre comment qu'on peut être redevable aussi par rapport à nos communautés, par rapport à nos bailleurs de fonds. Je crois que c'est une rencontre très importante, très enrichissante pour nous tous et surtout l'Afrique. C'est un continent où le retour en investissement est assez important. Et avec ce qui vient de se passer, le Canada, je veux dire que le Canada est en train de se réveiller à l'international, parce qu'en ce moment, on parle beaucoup plus de la Chine, mais si le Canada se réveille pour pouvoir ouvrir encore beaucoup plus d'ambassades, beaucoup plus de missions diplomatiques en Afrique. Ce mouvement de va-et-vient va créer de la richesse pour tous les continents, pour le Canada et pour plusieurs pays en Afrique.